From Buddy Rogers to Steve Austin and every champion in between, today we will be discussing the history of the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. But for this video, it will be the WWF or even WWWF, because we will be going back to the very first champion in Buddy Rogers, 1963, but we will be leading up to and finishing off at 1998. Now, why am I stopping at 98? To put it simply, the title belt lost all meaning at this point. It seemed like everybody in the company from 1998 to 1999, the end of 99, had that belt. I believe it changed hands 15 times. It was vacated twice. And to put it bluntly, they had at least one, maybe a couple of very undeserved champions. So kind of made a mockery of the title at that point. But let's go back and discuss this rich history. And to begin, it'll of course be Buddy Rogers. And if you know your history, you know that he is recognized, at least in some lists and some levels, as the very first ever World Heavyweight Champion to represent this company. Now, why do I say some lists? Well, it gets a little bit debatable here. Buddy Rogers was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion back in 1963. He lost the title to a man by the name of Lou Thesz. So at this point, there was, a lot of backstage stuff going on, politics, things of that nature. But let's just wrap this up quickly as far as that's concerned, because this video is about listing off the champions. But anyway, I think this needs to be said. There was a man by the name of Vince McMahon Sr. and another dude by the name of Toots Mondt, and they decided to defect from the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA, and Buddy Rogers went with them, and they formed their own wrestling federation known as the WWWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation. And they named Buddy Rogers as champion. Now, doesn't that seem a little bit fishy? They pretty much ignored the title loss to Lou Thesz and used all that credibility and changed the name, but that's not it. It gets a little bit more fishy here. They actually told the audience at that time that they had a big tournament, and Buddy Rogers won that tournament. It was totally fictitious. There was never a tournament. Buddy Rogers was just recognized as World Heavyweight Champion, taking nothing away from this man. And also in this video, we will be taking a closer look at all the belt changes, so that's kind of interesting to me. And you notice this was the belt that Buddy Rogers was wearing there, so I guess this was the very first ever WWF title belt. It's a funny looking belt, but I guess throw them all on a table and it might be the most individual looking, the most, different looking anyway. Buddy Rogers squared off against a young man by the name of Bruno Sammartino in 1963. So it was not long. He was awarded the officially named champion in April, I believe, and May 17th, 1963. Bruno Sammartino, he defeated Buddy Rogers very quickly. And like I said, I don't want to get into too much the backstories or anything like that, but Buddy Rogers was injured. For real, he had a legit injury, so they pretty much had to make this match a squash match to save any, further injuries to Buddy Rogers. So I believe it was a bear hug, and he submitted. So Bruno Sammartino is recognized in some historians' eyes as the very first ever WWF or WWWF champion. And he held that title for longer than anybody that preceded him. He held the title for a whopping 2,803 days. That's 7 years, over 7 years. He held that title, and of course, you can see here, they gave him a much nicer looking belt. Much more suitable for a championship title belt, if you ask me. Bruno finally dropped his title in 1971, January 18th to be precise. He faced off against a big 300-pound Russian bear, Ivan Koloff. And for great big men, I mean, Bruno was what, 260, 270, maybe even bigger? And there was no performance enhancers, things of that nature back then. So it was all them. And if you watch the match, I mean, there's no volume. There's no volume, so you can't hear the audience. But if you watch the match, they are very impressive. At the very start of the match, they show a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, and for their time, very impressive. Koloff ended the match with a flying knee off the top rope, and the legend goes, the audience went completely silent. And like I said, you can't hear the volume on the video of the matchup, but like I said, legend has it, you could hear a pin drop hit the ground, because nobody could believe it. It was 7 years, and he hadn't lost the title, and why should this guy come along and win the title? But he did, and they even gave him a new belt. Or actually, this was the belt that Bruno Sammartino walked to the ring with and lost. So he probably was told to keep the original title belt. I'm not exactly sure. It would be interesting to have all these belts. As a closer look at it here, that's, as far as I can tell, that's the exact belt that Bruno wore to the ring back in the 70s. And Ivan Koloff won it. And then just as fast, he lost it. This is Pedro Morales giving him a high cross body, Ivan Koloff that is, just a mere 21 days after he won that title. So he upset Bruno Sammartino, and then just 21 days later, Pedro Morales gave him a high cross body. I believe it was a double pin situation at the end of the match, and they were both pinned, but Pedro Morales must have got his shoulder up, or maybe the ref didn't see him. Either way, he won the match, and Pedro Morales gets nowhere near the respect that he deserves. He held that title for over 2 years, 1,027 days to be precise. And that belt that he has, that's one of my favorite belts, versions of it. And as you could see from the previous picture, it is the title belt that he won from Ivan Koloff. So perhaps Koloff got to keep the belt that he originally won. Anyway, I'm very interested in the title belts themselves. Stan Stasiak met Pedro Morales on December 1st, 1973 in Philadelphia. And he actually defeated Pedro Morales after having that belt for over 2 years. What a devastation to Pedro Morales. What a legend, though. Stan Stasiak, what a rough-looking ticket this guy was. He looks like he could outdrink you anyway, and probably beat you up, too. Anyway, he had that belt for 9 days, which means he was a transitional champion. He was keeping the belt warm for none other than Bruno Sammartino. He returned to the ring after 2 years of he was actually still competitive. He actually met Pedro Morales in a title matchup during that period. So he didn't quit wrestling. He just wasn't the champion, and he was now. He held that belt for another whopping 1,237 days, 4,040 days in total, and nobody, in my estimation, nobody will ever touch that record. Bruno's second reign was ended on April 30th, 1977, when he met superstar Billy Graham. One of, in my opinion, one of the best champions. But unfortunately, the WWF at that time did not see it that way, and he had the belt for 296 days, which is not a very long time for a great champion. But let us not misconstrue the situation. He was a heel champion, and at that time, it was basically a transitional champion, a guy holding the belt for a good guy or a face coming up. But the audience was getting behind this guy. He was billed as a bad guy, billed as a heel, but the audience loved the way he would get on the mic and he would talk jive about other fools and this and that. The guy was awesome, and people thought it was cool, and they were really getting behind him. But like I said, the WWWF did not see it that way, and they made superstar Billy Graham drop that title after, like I just said, 296 days to a tall glass of milk by the name of Bob Backlund. And with all due respect, Bob Backlund was, in my opinion, a very boring type wrestler, a great collegiate athlete, a great technical wrestler, things of that nature, but I definitely think it was a travesty to have him defeat a great champion like superstar Billy Graham. And there's some more political things that went on at this time. The WWF went back to be affiliated. They were now an affiliation of the NWA. So there was some interesting things. There was all kinds of crossover matches, things of that nature. Bob actually even went to Japan, and he fought Antonio Inoki. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Antonio Inoki defeated Bob Backlund for the WWF title. So he was a champion, right? Well, you check the lists and it's not official. They put it there, but it's not official. And Bob Backlund and Antonio Inoki met in a rematch for the title, and it ended in a DQ, and Antonio Inoki decided to vacate the title. All the while, in America, in the United States, they did not even acknowledge this. And I don't know if Bob Backlund lost the original belt or what happened, but during the confusion, they gave him this great big green and gold belt, which I consider quite ugly, but that's a personal opinion, I guess. It's just not my cup of tea. But neither is Bob Backlund. So, along with false title changes, affiliations with NWA, and then not being affiliated with NWA anymore, Bob Backlund's title history was filled with all kinds of eventful actions going on. And at this point, they stopped calling it the WWWF, and they renamed it the WWF. So, like I said, guys, girls, Bob Backlund's title history filled with eventful stuff, definitely worth to mention. And when it was all said and done, Backlund carried that title for 2,135 days without any breaks. Wow. If you count the Antonio Inoki thing, he had it for 648 days, his first reign, and then 1,470 days. But like I said, 2,135 days. That is just shy of 6 years. So almost 6 years as champion. He lost it to the Iron Sheik on December 26th, 1983, in New York City, of all places. Iron Sheik was, you guessed it, a transitional champion. So he had that ugly old belt for 28 days. Just not my favorite belt. 28 days. He was keeping it warm for Hulkamania. January 23rd, 1984, Hulkamania begins. He pinned the Iron Sheik. And whether you like Hulk Hogan or you dislike him, there is no doubt in my mind that in terms of putting butts in seats, Hulk Hogan was the best of all time. I don't think that anybody generated as much fanfare. And yeah, Hulk Hogan even had that big, ugly green belt. Not for very long, though. That's his mom and his dad, by the way. I think he got his genetics from his mom. She seems to be quite a very strong-looking woman. Must be pretty tall. I mean, he's no Tinkerbell, and she's right up there with him. So kudos to that. Him representing his parents on wrestling, actually. I remember watching this. But anyway, he got himself a different belt. And this one, it kind of looked like the old belt. The old belt, the one that, oh gosh darn it, Pedro Morales had it. A whole bunch of them had it. But anyway, it actually wasn't as nice. It wasn't as nice. He was seen with this belt. I'm not sure if this was in another federation or another league or what have you. Maybe it was a temporary WWF belt. Who knows? Never seen the likes of it. They eventually settled on this one. And if you ask me, still till this very day, this one here is one of, if not the best belts that the WWF ever represented their champion with. I mean, this was fantastic. And this was the belt that Hulk Hogan wore when he defended his title at WrestleMania 3 against Andre the Giant. And speaking of the big man, it was Andre the Giant himself that finally dethroned Hulk Hogan. It was at Saturday night's main event, February 5th, 1988. He dethroned Hulk after 4 years of having that title, 1,474 days to be exact. There was some fishy business with a fake ref, or I think it was Dave and Earl Hebner. They were twins, what have you. Hulk actually raised his shoulder, but by hook or by crook, Andre the Giant was crowned champion and with a new belt. You guys notice that? A new belt. Anyway, a fantastic one at that. Andre the Giant then turned right after he won the belt, and he looked at Ted DiBiase, and he said, "There you go. You're the champion now." Apparently, Ted DiBiase, he bought the title, or there was some sort of deal. Maybe he paid for the fake ref, and he paid off Andre the Giant. But either way, Ted DiBiase was your world heavyweight champion? Question mark. This is where, and the first time this had to actually happen, Jack Tunney, the quote-unquote president of the WWF, had to step in, and he said, this business will end. The title is vacated for now. We will, however, count Andre the Giant as a champion, but the Ted DiBiase thing, that does not count. Andre the Giant has no right to name a champion. He just gave the belt over, so that is stricken from the record altogether. But he did wear that brand new belt, by the way. Come WrestleMania 4, they had this fantastic tournament. This WrestleMania gets bad reviews, I guess, but hey, I found it very entertaining. I thought it was fantastic. And they billed that belt as being a brand new belt, but as you've seen before, many of the other guys, Ted DiBiase, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, they all had that belt. But anyway, it came down to Macho Man Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase himself. So he did get a crack at getting that belt, but it wasn't meant to be. Macho Man Randy Savage, "Ooh yeah, Elizabeth, will you marry me?" He won the title. He made history. And what a fantastic champion he was. And he actually made it to the following year's WrestleMania. He faced off against Hulk Hogan. You see, throughout the year, he became a heel. He became a bad guy. And him and Hulk Hogan, once good friends, turned bitter enemies. And they locked horns and had maybe Hulk Hogan's best match at WrestleMania. And very difficult to hang on to that belt after this event. And Macho Man, he did in fact lose to Hulk Hogan. And he had that belt for 371 days, just over a year, so not bad at all. Fast forward to the next year's WrestleMania. This was WrestleMania 6. This was the big one. The Ultimate Warrior, the Intercontinental Champion versus the World Heavyweight Champion, Hulk Hogan. What a matchup. Couldn't ask for any more excitement. And I remember this when I was a kid. Half the audience was for Hulk, half was for Warrior. Man, oh man. And this event was becoming very difficult, almost impossible to make it through if you were the champion. If you were walking in there with the belt, chances are you were not walking out there with the belt, and that reigned true for WrestleMania 6. Ultimate Warrior became, in my estimation, the only man to pin Hulk Hogan in his prime without any, cheating going on, just a fair 1, 2, 3. And Hulk had that belt that time for 364 days, just one day shy of 1 year. So anyway, Ultimate Warrior took the reins. He held on to the belt for 293 days, just 3 days shy of superstar Billy Graham's 296 days. Two of the best physiques of all time in wrestling. Food for thought. Ultimate Warrior ultimately lost his title at the Royal Rumble 1991. Randy Savage, he came down and there was some fishy business. He hit him in the head with his scepter, for goodness sakes. He was probably upset because earlier on, Sensational Sherry, Macho Man's manager, she got awfully familiar with the Ultimate Warrior. Very familiar. And it was really inappropriate to show this for children. You can see a couple of greasy characters there really enjoying this show. But anyway, Sergeant Slaughter ultimately got the win. He got the pin on the Ultimate Warrior. And I was so upset. I mean, taking nothing away from the man himself, Sergeant Slaughter. As a kid and as a fan, he was, well, he sucked. But with all due respect, Sergeant Slaughter, he held on to the belt for 64 days. He was a transitional champion. They went and they put the belt back on to Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7, 1991, March 24th. Food for thought. Los Angeles, happened in Los Angeles. That was Hulk Hogan's third title reign, adding another 248 days to his ultimate record. He eventually met up with a newcomer, The Undertaker, at 1991's Survivor Series, one of my favorite events. But this was, of course, the one-on-one for the title. And Ric Flair came down. He interfered. He put the chair down on the mat. And apparently Undertaker tombstoned Hulk Hogan right on his head. You can actually see some space there between Hogan's head and the chair. Undertaker was very careful not to hurt Hulk Hogan. But apparently Hulk Hogan... Anyway, Undertaker won the title. He beat Hulk Hogan for the title, the 1, 2, 3. But apparently Hulk Hogan went crying to Vince McMahon. And this is real-life backstage stuff. And he complained that The Undertaker was dumping people on their heads, which was not true. And I guess Vince had no choice but to strip The Undertaker of his belt 6 days after he won. So Undertaker was champion for 6 days because Hulk Hogan, he wanted his belt back. And it was at a different event, Tuesday in Texas, they called it. They were trying something new, different type of a pay-per-view. And Hulk Hogan, he actually cheated too. And he won his 4th title here. But don't think Jack Tunney was going to let all this take place. He stepped in and he stripped Hulk Hogan of the title. He stripped The Undertaker of the title. Both of them were titleless because of their cheating nature. And this was actually quite exciting. They announced that the 1992 Royal Rumble matchup, the winner of the match, would not only receive the prestige of being the Royal Rumble champion, but they would also receive the belt. And considering Undertaker and Hulk Hogan were both in this matchup, made it all the more interesting. Ric Flair, he eventually threw out Psycho Sid, or Sid Justice as they called him at that point in time, and Ric Flair, lo and behold, became champion. Of all those big giants out there, surprised they went with Ric Flair. But either way, he was your champion, but only for 77 days. He lost the belt to Macho Man Randy Savage on April 5th, 1992 at WrestleMania 8, Indianapolis, Indiana. Macho Man, he hung on to the title for 149 days, and it seemed to be a growing trend here. There was no more 2 or 3 year-long champions. He actually flip-flopped. He lost the belt back to Ric Flair. Ric Flair won the belt on September 1st, 1992 on Primetime Wrestling. It was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And Flair actually only held that title for a mere 41 days before he lost the belt to none other than Bret the Hitman Hart. And this was a surprise to fans. This was a real shocker. Bret took that title October 12th, 1992 in Saskatoon, which of course was Bret Hart's home country of Canada. So an extra special night for Bret the Hitman Hart. This was his first reign as champion, as we will see as this video progresses. he does win several more. He held on to that title the first time for 174 days. And considering the last prior title reigns, it wasn't that bad. He lost the belt at, of course, WrestleMania. It seemed impossible. Nobody could hang on to that belt. He lost it to a massive heel, Yokozuna, who, and I made a video about this, who became the very first ever heel to win the title at a WrestleMania event. So kudos goes out to Yokozuna for making history. But what happens next really sickens me. Due to some politics, due to his own, outright crying about it backstage, Hulk Hogan was written in, seemingly at the last minute, he was written in the quote-unquote storyline to come out at WrestleMania 9, right after Bret Hart's match with him and Yokozuna, and I guess Yokozuna challenged him right there on the spot. So it was supposed to be a big surprise to the audience. Hulk Hogan runs in. Fuji was going to throw the old salt in the eyes. And of course, Hogan ducks and this and that. He wins the title. Hulk Hogan comes back and at this point, he should have just let the spotlight go on somebody else. Let Yokozuna have his title win. Or let Bret Hart, And that's what disappoints me the most. And I don't want to get into it too much, but at this point, Hulk Hogan, he should have, or he's supposed to, drop the belt to Bret the Hitman Hart. That's what was supposed to happen. Us as fans, we wanted to see that so bad. But Hulk, being Hulk, said, "No, brother, I'll drop the belt to Yokozuna." So 70 days later, Hulk Hogan held that belt for 70 days and never once, to my knowledge, even walked out to a WWF ring. Until, of course, King of the Ring, 1993, he did, in fact. He dropped the belt to one Yokozuna, and I was quite pleased about this. It was, in my opinion, a little bit stupid, with all due respect to the writers or whoever set this up, but a cameraman comes out and some flames come out, burn Hogan in the eyes. Apparently, they didn't even come close to him. So it was pretty ridiculous. And Yokozuna, in my opinion, the flames didn't hit Hulk, and Yokozuna beat him fairly there. And Yokozuna held on to the belt that time, not for a couple of minutes like he did at WrestleMania, but he held the belt for 280 days. As a heel, that was very impressive. By the time WrestleMania 10 rolled around, it was time for Yokozuna to do the honors, and that he did. He dropped the belt to Bret the Hitman Hart. Of course, there was other factors during that night. Both of these guys, earlier on this event, both wrestled, so this was their second match of the night. So kudos to their endurance, especially Yokozuna, being a monster of a man. So Bret Hart, fantastic. He takes home his second World Heavyweight Championship title. You can see Lex Luger and Razor Ramon hoisting him up on their shoulders. And I think at one point, Razor and Lex striked up a conversation. I think they were ignoring that they even had Bret on their shoulders, and Bret almost fell back. It looked like he was kind of freaking out a little bit. Maybe they were discussing what they were going to do later on, their plans perhaps. Bret Hart held that title this time for 248 days until he met the return of Bob Backlund. Can you imagine that? Bob Backlund. He met Bret Hart in a throw-in-the-towel match, November 23rd, 1994, at that year's Survivor Series, San Antonio, Texas. So Bob Backlund, he became a heel. He was a heel. He was a bad guy now after being a clean-cut good guy for years and years. And he held the title last time for what, almost 6 years? This time, 3 days. 3 days he held that title. Transitional champion for sure. He met and he ran into a brick wall, or a Mack truck, more fittingly, in Diesel. Big Diesel, 7 foot tall, kicked him in the gut, gave him a power bomb, pinned him. It was a squash match, didn't last long. So Diesel was champion, this seemingly newcomer to the sport, quote unquote, and he was champion for 358 days. So he was the champion for longer than any of the recent champions. You can go back on the list, and I mean, not too many of them before the really long reigning champions have a longer single reign, that is, than Big Diesel. He actually became the first man since WrestleMania 3 to walk into a WrestleMania event with the strap and go back to your hotel room at the end of the night with the strap intact. Diesel lost his title at Survivor Series 1995 to none other than Bret the Hitman Hart. So Bret the Hitman Hart, he lost his title in 1994 Survivor Series, and just 1 year later, he recaptured that title. So kudos to him. And he held the title this time for a mere 133 days. So Bret Hart, he never really did get a nice long reign as champion like he really should have. Bret the Hitman Hart lost his title at the following WrestleMania, like pretty much everybody before him, besides Diesel, of course. He lost it to Shawn Michaels, Heartbreak Kid. And what a match, a 60-minute Iron Man match. And for an hour-long match, you might think boring, but it was anything but boring. These guys really lit it up at WrestleMania 12, March 31st, 1996, in Anaheim, California. Fantastic. Shawn Michaels, his first reign as champion lasted 231 days. So not too bad, not too bad. Many of his fans, of course, figured that it should have been longer. He lost the belt to a big giant of a man named Psycho Sid. He was previously Sid Justice, Sid Vicious, and other federations. Big Psycho Sid. He took the title on November 17th, 1996, at that year's Survivor Series. It was in Madison Square Garden, New York City. It was an outstanding crowd, I remember. They were all rooting for Psycho Sid. He was supposed to be the heel, but it just wasn't that way. He was, the fans were for him. He held the title for a mere 63 days before he dropped it back to Shawn Michaels. So Shawn Michaels recaptured the title at the 1997 Royal Rumble in San Antonio, Texas. He was now a two-time World Heavyweight Champion, but the strange thing is here, Shawn Michaels went out on Raw and he claimed he had a knee injury, which later on Bret Hart would claim that was a pussyfoot injury, I believe he called it. And Shawn Michaels vacated the title. In a seemingly sad moment, Vince McMahon came down and gave him a big hug. I think Vince just wanted to hug Shawn Michaels. Oh, Shawn, I love you. Anyway, all foolishness aside. At the Royal Rumble, of course, 1997 Royal Rumble, the winner goes on to WrestleMania to face a champion. So, since there was no champion, they took the final four gentlemen at that year's Royal Rumble, which were Bret the Hitman Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, and Will It's Time, Vader Time. Big Van Vader. The four of them went at it at an In Your House show, February 16th, 1997. And the winner was Bret the Hitman Hart. He was now a four-time heavyweight champion. And guess how long his reign lasted? Guess. 1 day. He lost the belt the next night on Raw to Big Psycho Sid. So Sidney was now a two-time champion. It was a ladder match, if I'm not mistaken. And this time, Big Sidney held on to the belt for a mere 34 days. So Big Sid never really got a long title reign either. He dropped the belt at WrestleMania, of course. Lucky number 13. And of course, it was lucky for The Undertaker, because he was, in fact, the man that defeated Psycho Sid at WrestleMania 13. At the Rosemont Horizon, I do believe. This was Undertaker's second title win in quite a few years. He won the first title very rapidly, and then quite a long span without any title wins. Undertaker, he was a little bit strange with the belt, I have to say. He's more of a phenom without the title. He held the belt for 133 days before he dropped the belt at SummerSlam. Now, he dropped the belt to Bret the Hitman Hart, but Shawn Michaels was the special guest referee, and there was some funny business. I mean, you can watch it for yourself, but Shawn Michaels definitely interfered, hit Undertaker in the head with the chair, and he ended up counting Undertaker out with Bret Hart pinning him. So Bret Hart ended up taking home his 5th and final World Heavyweight Championship title, and that was a tied the then record of Hulk Hogan. So between Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan, they both had 5 titles. Very impressive. Bret Hart held that title for 98 days before he met Shawn Michaels at the 1997 Survivor Series, and I'm sure all of you know where this is headed. It was the Montreal Screwjob, and I'm sure you could look it up yourself. I'm not going to go into it too much, but at the end of the day, Shawn Michaels, he won the title, and he held on to that title for 140 days before he met Stone Cold Steve Austin. March 29th, 1998, WrestleMania 14. What a match. What a moment. And Stone Cold Steve Austin, he pinned Shawn Michaels and captured his very first ever World Heavyweight Championship title. So after all the confusion of many of the wrestlers, they were winning the title and it seemed to be bouncing back and forth. And the WWF itself was just not set on one man. And finally, Stone Cold Steve Austin reigned supreme, and to me, he was that man, and really, it was the last time that the WWF, WWE for that matter, really settled and dedicated and put all their cards into one basket, into one hat for Stone Cold Steve Austin. They eventually gave him a nice new belt, a little bit bigger. He was quite a corporate champion there, as you can see, with a nice little tie. He eventually got his own smoking skull belt, but I was never a huge fan of that. I actually preferred the very first ever title that he won from Shawn Michaels, and that was the original belt that, that Macho Man, all them guys, even Andre the Giant held that belt. So a lot of history behind that one. Probably my personal favorite. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, everybody in between, I really hope you enjoyed this presentation from the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, to Stone Cold Steve Austin, 1963, all the way to 1998. Every champion in between. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this one. And if you did, enjoy this type of content, hit thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers and then eventually beyond. Have a great day.